My name is Earl Ray Whitman. I'm 74 years old, and I live in Joplin, Missouri. Last Saturday, my own flesh and blood told the whole cafe I embarrassed him. I was sitting on my regular stool at the Route 66 Cafe, the same spot I've claimed every Saturday morning since 1972. Coffee black, eggs over easy, toast dry. Doreen knows my order before I sit down. She's worked that counter longer than some marriages last. The place still smells like it did back then. Bacon grease and burnt coffee, and something warm you can't quite name. I was halfway through my eggs when the door opened, and in walked Brandon Cole Whitman, my son. He's 44 now, and lives in Kansas City. Works in something called private equity. I don't pretend to understand it. What I do understand is the shoes he was wearing cost more than I pull in from my pension in a month. Italian leather, no laces. The kind of shoes that tell you a man hasn't done a day's manual labor in his life. He was in town for his 25th reunion at Wharton Business School. They were having some kind of weekend thing at the country club. He'd told me about it on the phone 2 weeks back and said he might stop by to say hello. I stood up when I saw him, wiped my mouth with the paper napkin. Brandon, he looked at me like I'd just tracked mud across his white carpet. Dad, he said it quiet, but not quiet enough. What are you doing here? Having breakfast. Same as every Saturday. His jaw tightened. He glanced around the cafe, at Doreen behind the counter, at old Frank Doherty in the corner booth, at the retired teacher whose name I can never remember sitting by the window. Then he leaned in close, and I could smell his cologne. Expensive, sharp. Dad, you embarrass me by showing up looking like that. The words hit differently than a fist you can see coming. I was wearing my usual Saturday clothes, clean jeans, flannel shirt I'd ironed myself that morning, work boots I'd polished the night before because that's what a man does. My hands were wrapped around a coffee mug that had been refilled twice, and yeah, those hands show every year I spent in refineries and power plants from here to Tulsa. Scars across the knuckles, calluses that never smooth out, nails that stay dark no matter how much I scrub. I looked at my son. I looked at his smooth hands, and his perfect haircut, and his shirt that probably cost what I used to make in a week. Half the cafe had heard him. I could feel it in the silence. I set down my mug, pulled my wallet from my back pocket, laid a $5 bill on the counter next to my plate. Doreen was pretending to wipe down the far end, but I knew she'd heard every word. "Morning, Doreen," I said. "Morning, Earl." I walked past Brandon without another word, pushed open that glass door with the Route 66 decal peeling at the corner, got into my '04 Silverado, and sat there for a minute with my hands on the wheel. Through the window, I could see Brandon order something, probably just coffee. He checked his watch twice while Doreen poured it. I started the engine and pulled out onto Main Street, drove home with the windows down. Even though it was only 50 degrees, I needed the air. That's when I started thinking about everything these embarrassing hands had built. These hands laid pipe in -20 blizzards so he could wear loafers without tassels. I drove the long way home, out past the old zinc mines, past the plant where I worked my first job out of high school. The Silverado knew the route, 218,000 miles on her, and she still runs smooth because I change the oil every 3,000 like clockwork. I looked down at my hands on the wheel. The scar across my left thumb from a slip with a pipe wrench in Amarillo, 1984. The crooked pinky on my right that never set quite right after I caught it between a flange and a beam in Little Rock. The burn marks from slag spatter. The permanent grease under the nails that no amount of lava soap ever completely lifts. These hands paid for Brandon's private tutors when he was struggling with algebra in 8th grade. $200 a month we didn't have, so I picked up Saturday overtime at the refinery. 12-hour shifts in August heat that turned your hard hat into a frying pan. These hands signed the checks for Stanford. 4 years at $35,000 a year. Back when that meant something. I took on every extra job I could find. Welded fences for ranchers on Sundays. Replumbed half the houses in Jasper County on my days off. Mary, that's Brandon's mother, God rest her, she took in sewing and never complained once, not even when her fingers bled from pushing that needle through denim. These hands wrote the check for $25,000 when Brandon's first sure thing real estate deal in Kansas City went sideways, and he called at 2 in the morning, voice shaking, saying he'd lose everything if I couldn't help. I cleaned out the account Mary and I had been building for our retirement, told him not to worry about paying it back, told him family doesn't work that way. These hands wired him $8,000 for the down payment on his first condo, sent him $5,000 when he needed a car that looked professional for client meetings, covered his health insurance for 2 years when he was getting his consulting business started and couldn't afford it on his own. I never asked for thank you cards, never expected my name on any buildings. That's not how a father measures his worth, but I remembered every single dollar, remembering the month Mary and I ate spaghetti 14 nights straight so we could make Brandon's tuition payment on time. I remembered the time I drove to work on a bad tire for 3 weeks because the choice was new tires or Brandon's books for spring semester. I never told him about any of it. What would be the point? A man doesn't send his son invoices for love. I pulled into my driveway. The house is small, 1,200 square feet. Bought it in 1976 for $18,000. Paid it off in 2001. The roof needs replacing, and the porch sags a little on the east side, but it's mine. I sat in the truck for a long time before I went inside. That's when Brandon called with his half apology. He wanted me to hide so I wouldn't embarrass him twice in one weekend. The phone rang at 8:30 that night. I was sitting in my recliner watching the Cardinals game on mute, not really seeing it. I knew it was him before I looked at the screen. "Hey, Dad." Brandon. He cleared his throat. That thing he does when he's about to say something he doesn't want to. I've heard that throat clear 100 times. When he wrecked Mary's car at 17, when he dropped out of pre-med his sophomore year, when he told us he was marrying Jennifer, and we hadn't even met her yet. Listen, about this morning, at the cafe, I waited. I didn't mean it like that. You know how it is. I've got these Wharton guys in town, and there's investors at the reunion, and it's a lot of pressure. Image matters in my business. You understand? Sure, son. I've been stressed with this new fund we're launching. 7 days a week. I'm not sleeping right. So when I saw you there in your work clothes, I reacted wrong. You know I didn't mean anything by it. I could hear voices in the background, laughter, music. He was at some party already. It's fine, Brandon. Good. I'm glad you understand. He paused. Actually, there's one more thing. Tomorrow night we're having this barbecue thing at the country club. Reunion dinner on the lawn. It's kind of a big deal. The dean's flying in. A couple guys from the Wall Street Journal. Very formal. Okay. So I was thinking, maybe it's better if you sit this one out. Just this one. It's not really a family thing anyway. Mostly business. Lots of shop talk. You'd probably be bored. I looked at the TV. Some pitcher I didn't recognize was on the mound. You don't want me there. It's not that, Dad. It's just, these are important connections. And you know how these guys are. They can be judgmental. I just don't want anything to distract from the networking. This is my career we're talking about. I thought about saying something. Thought about asking him if he remembered who paid for the degree that got him in that room. Thought about asking him when exactly I became something he needed to hide. Instead, I said, "Sure, son. I'll stay home." "Thanks, Dad. I knew you'd get it. I'll stop by Sunday morning before I head back to Kansas City. We can grab breakfast or something." "Sounds good. Love you. Love you too." He hung up first. He always does. I sat there with the phone in my hand for a long time. The Cardinals lost in extra innings, but I wasn't really watching anymore. I was thinking about the fire safe in my closet. I always told myself a man doesn't keep score with his kids. That night, I started wondering if maybe he should. I got up from the recliner and walked to my bedroom. I opened the closet, pushed aside the winter coats Mary used to wear. I still can't bring myself to donate them, and pulled out the fire safe from the back corner. Black metal, combination lock. I spun the dial. 14, 32, 8. Mary's birthday. Inside were the important papers. The deed to the house. My discharge papers from when I did my 2 years at Fort Leonard Wood. Mary's death certificate. Our marriage license. And underneath all of it, a manila envelope I'd been adding to for 20 years. I'd never meant it as ammunition. That's not why I kept the records. I kept them because I'm a man who writes things down, always have been. When you work union jobs, you learn to document everything. Every hour worked, every payment received, every promise made. Put it on paper, or it didn't happen. I opened the envelope and spread the contents on my bed. Copies of wire transfers, bank statements with yellow highlights, canceled checks with Mary's handwriting and mine, receipts, tuition payment confirmations, a stack of papers 2 inches thick that told the story of every dollar I'd sent my son over 26 years, $42,000 to Stanford, spread over 4 years, $25,000 for the bad real estate deal, $8,000 for the condo down payment, $5,000 for the car, $3,700 for the medical bills when he had that motorcycle accident, $6,000 in smaller amounts, $500 here, $800 there. Every time he called with an emergency that couldn't wait, I'd added it up once, about 5 years back, when I was updating the records. $117,000, not counting the interest it would have earned if I'd left it in the bank, not counting what Mary and I could have done with that money for ourselves. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at those papers. I'd never asked him for a penny back, never held it over his head. That's not what fathers do. You give because you love. You sacrifice because that's the deal you signed the day they put that baby in your arms, and you realized your life wasn't about you anymore. But sitting there in my bedroom, thinking about how he'd told me I embarrassed him, thinking about how he'd asked me to stay away so his business friends wouldn't see his old man in work boots, I started thinking maybe it was time Brandon understood exactly what these embarrassing hands had built for him. I put the papers back in the envelope, set it on my nightstand. Tomorrow was Sunday. He said he'd stop by before heading back to Kansas City. Maybe it was time we had a different kind of conversation. He graduated thinking he was self-made. I still have the second mortgage papers to prove different. Sunday morning, I woke up at 5:30, like always, made coffee in the same percolator Mary and I got as a wedding gift in 1971, sat at the kitchen table with the envelope in front of me, and started going through the papers one by one. The first document was dated April 1998, Brandon's sophomore year at Stanford. He'd called on a Tuesday night. I remember because Tuesday was my poker night with the union guys, and I'd just folded a decent hand when Mary came to the door of Eddie's garage with the cordless phone and a look on her face that meant trouble. "Dad, I need help." His voice had that tight sound, like he was trying not to cry, but couldn't quite manage it. It turned out he and 2 roommates had started some kind of internet company. This was back when everybody thought they were going to be the next Yahoo. They'd borrowed money from 3 different credit cards, maxed them all out buying servers and software. The business plan was garbage. I knew that even then. But Brandon was 20 years old and convinced he'd found the future. The future lasted 6 months. Then the credit card companies wanted their money, 18% interest compounding monthly. The banks were threatening to repossess everything he owned, right down to his dorm furniture. He needed $22,000, needed it in 2 weeks, or he'd have to leave school. I'd just made the final payment on our house 3 months earlier, 12 years ahead of schedule. Mary and I had celebrated with dinner at the steakhouse on Range Line Road. It was the first time we'd eaten out anywhere nice in 2 years. She'd ordered the sirloin, and I'd had the ribeye, and we'd split a piece of chocolate cake and felt like millionaires. I called the bank the next morning, took out a second mortgage, $25,000 at 7.3%, 30-year term. I wired Brandon the money that Friday, told him it was from a bonus I'd gotten at work, told him not to worry about paying it back, just focus on his classes. He thanked me, said he'd learned his lesson about business, said he was going to stick to his economics major and play it safe from now on. I paid that second mortgage for 6 more years, $193 a month. Mary took on extra alterations work. I picked up weekend shifts I didn't tell Brandon about. We got the house clear again in 2004, and I remember thinking at least it was done. At least we were free. Brandon graduated summa cum laude in 2000, got into Wharton for his MBA, gave a speech at his graduation dinner about pulling himself up by his bootstraps, and making his own way in the world. I sat at that dinner in a rented suit and watched him accept an award for entrepreneurship. 200 people applauded his self-made success story. Mary squeezed my hand under the table. She knew. She always knew. But we never said a word. That's not what parents do. I set the 1998 papers aside and picked up the next stack. He bragged to his friends his dad was just a pipe fitter who wouldn't understand real estate. The market crashed in September 2008. I remember because I watched my retirement account lose 40% of its value in 6 weeks. Every morning I'd check the statement, calling Fidelity's automated line or waiting for the mail, and every morning the number was smaller. Brandon called in March 2009. Different kinds of panic this time. Older, sharper. He'd bought a downtown Kansas City loft in 2007, 23rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, granite countertops, the kind of place you see in magazines. He'd put down 5% and gotten one of those adjustable mortgages everyone was handing out like candy back then. The rate adjusted. The value dropped. His mortgage was suddenly worth more than the condo. The bank wanted to foreclose unless he could come up with $32,000 to restructure the loan. He had 3 weeks. "I've got 18 saved," he said. "But Dad, I'm tapped out. The fund I'm with is bleeding investors. My bonus got cut in half. I don't know what to do." I was 62 years old. I had about $140,000 in my 401k. I was planning to retire at 65, maybe 66 if I felt good. Mary and I were going to take that RV trip out west we'd been talking about for 20 years. I called Fidelity the next day, cashed out $35,000. The penalty was 10%. The taxes ate another chunk. I netted about 24. Wired Brandon $14,000. Kept the rest to cover the tax bill I knew was coming in April. He kept the condo. The market came back. He sold it in 2013 for $80,000 more than he paid. Took that money and leveraged it into his first real private equity deal. I heard him tell the story once at a Christmas dinner at his place. This was maybe 2015. He had some colleagues over, young guys in expensive watches. "The crash was the best thing that ever happened to me," Brandon said, refilling wine glasses. "I was smart enough to hold the property when everyone else was panicking. That's the difference between people who understand investment and people who don't. My old man, for example, great guy, but he's just a pipe fitter. Wouldn't know a capital gain from a hole in the ground." His friends laughed. Polite laughter. The kind you give your boss when he makes a joke that isn't quite funny. I was sitting in the living room, could hear every word through the kitchen doorway. Mary touched my arm. "Earl, I'm fine," I said. I was 68 years old and still working because that 401k I'd rated never quite recovered. The RV trip never happened. Mary got sick in 2016, pancreatic cancer that took her in 8 months. And by then, there wasn't money for trips anyway. There wasn't money for much of anything except the treatments that didn't work. I picked up the next set of papers from the pile on my kitchen table. This one hurt worse. The fund still carries the Whitman name. The farm doesn't anymore. My father bought that land in 1953, 160 acres southeast of Joplin, right up against the Newton County line. He paid $8,000 for it, raised cattle on it for 30 years before his heart gave out in 1983. He left it to me in his will, the only thing of value he ever owned. I kept it through everything. Kept it through Brandon's college years and Mary's medical bills and every rough stretch we hit. I couldn't bring myself to sell it. That land had my father's sweat in it. His name on the deed felt like his voice still in the world. The property taxes were manageable, about $1,800 a year. I'd drive out there every few months, walk the fence line, make sure nobody was dumping trash on it. Sometimes I'd just sit in the truck and look at it, think about my old man on his tractor, think about maybe giving it to Brandon someday. Brandon called in August 2017. He was 44 by then, had his MBA, had his VP title, had his reputation in the Kansas City finance circles. He was putting together his first private equity fund, real estate distressed properties. The pitch was solid. I didn't understand half of it, but I could tell he believed in it. He needed $10 million to close, had commitments for $5.8 million. Was 4.2 short with a deadline 30 days out. If I don't hit the minimum, the whole thing falls apart, he said. Every investor walks. 2 years of work are gone. My reputation's finished in this city. What about the firm you work for? They'll contribute, but only if I match a portion personally. Shows skin in the game. I need 4.2. I've got access to maybe 200,000 in liquid assets. Dad, I don't know what else to do. I told him I'd think about it. I drove out to the farm that weekend. I walked the whole property. It took me 3 hours. I'm not as fast as I used to be. The land was worth about $4.8 million by then. Development was pushing south from Joplin. Some housing company had been sniffing around for 2 years, leaving cards in my mailbox. I called them Monday morning. We closed in 3 weeks. I netted $4.3 million after fees and taxes, set up a trust through a lawyer in Springfield Brandon had never met, wired the money into the fund as a silent partner. The lawyer in Springfield set it up so the trust name was generic, Ozark Holdings, LLC. Nothing that would connect back to me. Brandon had dozens of investors. One more anonymous entity wouldn't raise questions. Brandon never knew it was me. The fund closed. His reputation was made. Within a year, he'd raised 3 more funds. The business press started calling him a rising star. His name was on the letterhead, Whitman Capital Partners. My father's name. Bought with my father's land. I got a statement every quarter showing my returns. 7% annually. Not bad. Not enough to buy back what I'd lost. I set those papers down and looked at the clock. 7:15. Brandon said he'd stop by around 9 before heading back to Kansas City. I had time to finish going through the envelope. I figured if I embarrassed him so bad, maybe the truth would embarrass him worse. Friday morning, I drove to the post office on Main Street. Small envelope this time, not the thick manila one with all the records, just copies, 10 pages, the important ones. I'd written a short letter on a piece of notebook paper. Keep it simple. Brandon, you asked me not to come to your reunion because I embarrass you. I understand. These papers show what an embarrassment I've been. I thought you should have them for your records. Dad, I addressed it to his lake house, the place he'd bought 2 years ago on Table Rock Lake, just over the Arkansas line. 4 bedrooms, boat dock. He'd shown me pictures on his phone, never invited me down. I knew the reunion barbecue was Saturday night, knew the envelope would arrive Saturday morning, knew he'd be there with 200 of his classmates and all those investors he was so worried about impressing. I mailed it priority overnight. Signature required. I spent the rest of Friday working in my garage, rebuilt the carburetor on my old Craftsman lawnmower, listened to the Cardinals game on the radio, didn't think too hard about what I'd done. Sunday morning, I got up early and made a full breakfast. Eggs, bacon, toast, hash browns, the kind of meal Mary used to make on Sundays before church. I wasn't sure Brandon would stay long enough to eat, but I made it anyway. At 8:45, I heard his car in the driveway. That BMW he'd bought last year. $70,000. I remember because he'd mentioned the price like it was something to be proud of. I heard his door slam. I heard his footsteps on the porch. Quick. Angry. The knock was hard. 3 times. Not the way you knock on your father's door when you're stopping by to say goodbye. I walked to the door. I took my time. Wiped my hands on a dish towel. When I opened it, Brandon was standing there in jeans and a polo shirt. His face was red. He had the envelope in his hand. The pages crumpled like he'd been holding them too tight. What the hell is this? I looked at him, looked at my son standing on my porch with proof of every dollar I'd ever given him, demanding an explanation. Truth, I said. Come on in. He didn't move, just stood there breathing hard. Behind him, I could see neighbors starting their Sunday routines. Bill across the street getting his newspaper. The Hendersons loaded their car for church. You had no right, Brandon said. I had every right. It's my money, my records, my story. You humiliated me. Now you know how it feels. He stared at me, and for the first time in maybe 20 years, I saw my son clearly. He always told people he bootstrapped everything. Paper doesn't lie. Brandon's lake house sits on 3 acres of prime Table Rock waterfront. I'd never been inside, but I'd seen the photos he'd posted online. Timber beams, Stone fireplace. Windows facing the water like something out of a magazine. Saturday morning, the place was chaotic. I know because Jennifer, Brandon's ex-wife, we still talk sometimes, told me later what happened. The caterers arrived at 7, white tents going up on the lawn, tables for 200, string quartet setting up by the boat dock, bartenders stocking 3 separate bars. Brandon had hired an event company out of Springfield to handle everything. Cost him $40,000 just for the party. The overnight courier came at 8:15. Brandon was in his study going over his speech. He'd been working on it all week. 20 minutes about vision and legacy and what it means to build something that lasts. Jennifer said he'd practiced it so many times she could recite it herself. He signed for the envelope without looking at it, set it on his desk, went back to his notes. At 8:30, his business partner called about a contract issue. While he was on the phone, he opened the envelope, just to see what it was. I'd kept it simple. 10 pages. Copies, not originals. The 1998 second mortgage documents, showing the $25,000 I'd borrowed against a paid-off house. The 2009 fidelity statement, showing the 401k withdrawal, $35,000. My handwriting on the wire transfer slip, for Brandon, condo payment. The 2017 farm sale closing documents. Purchase price, $4.8 million. Right below it, the trust paperwork showing how that money had been wired into Whitman Capital Partners 30 days later, and paper-clipped to the front, a note on my scratch paper from the kitchen drawer. Brandon, you asked me not to come to your reunion because I embarrass you. I understand. These papers show what an embarrassment I've been. I thought you should have them for your records. Dad, Jennifer said he went completely still, didn't move for maybe 2 minutes. The business partner was still talking on the phone, but Brandon wasn't hearing any of it. Then he started going through the pages, slowly, reading every line. She watched from the doorway, said his face went from red to white to something she'd never seen before. He hung up on his business partner mid-sentence, sat there with those papers spread across his desk. The speech he'd been practicing was still pulled up on his laptop. All those words about building something from nothing, about vision and sacrifice and the courage to bet on yourself when nobody else would. Every word was a lie he'd believed himself. Outside the window, the caterers were arranging chairs. The quartet was tuning. Investors were starting to arrive early, parking their cars along the gravel drive. Brandon picked up his phone, put it down, picked it up again. I'd included my cell number at the bottom of the note. He didn't call. Instead, he sat there with the truth laid out in front of him, and for the first time in his adult life, he had to look at it. Turns out the Emperor's suit was sewn by a pipe fitter from Joplin. Brandon's CFO showed up at 9, a guy named Derek something. I'd met him once at a Christmas party years back. Sharp kid, MIT. The kind who could run numbers in his head faster than most people could type them. He walked into the study without knocking. That's what Jennifer told me. He had questions about the investor packet for tonight's presentation. He saw Brandon sitting there, saw the papers spread across the desk. You okay? Brandon didn't answer, just pushed the documents across the desk. Derek picked them up. He started reading. His eyes got wider with each page. Holy shit. Yeah. This is your dad? Yeah. Derek read through it again, slower this time. Then he pulled out his phone and started tapping, calculating. $25,000 in 1998, with compound interest at market rate over 27 years. That's about $75,000 in today's dollars. He kept tapping. The 401k withdrawal, $14,000 directly, but he took the penalty and the tax hit, so the actual cost to him was more like $35,000. Call it $50,000 present value. He got to the farm sale documents, stopped tapping, just stared. 4.3 into the fund. Jesus Christ, Brandon. That was him. Silent partner. Trust out of Springfield. I never knew. That stake is worth about $7.2 million now. But the opportunity cost, what he could have earned if he'd invested it anywhere else. Derek did more calculations. Conservative estimate. He gave up $11 million. Minimum. Brandon put his head in his hands. $11 million, Derek said again. From a union pension. They sat there, Outside, someone was testing the sound system. Frank Sinatra playing across the lawn. My Way. Derek set the papers down. The bootstrap story you've been telling. The whole self-made thing. I know. Every pitch deck, every investor meeting, every interview. I know. Brandon, you've built your entire brand on... I said I know. Derek looked at him, then at the papers, then back at Brandon. What are you gonna do? I have to give a speech in 4 hours. 200 people. Half of them have money in my funds because they believe the story. What story? This one or the real one? Brandon didn't answer. Derek picked up the note, read it again. He signed it, Love, Dad. Yeah. After you told him he embarrassed you. Brandon stood up. I walked to the window. The lawn looked perfect. White tents bright in the morning sun. Flowers in arrangements that cost more than most people spend on weddings. Everything exactly how he'd planned it. He gave me everything, Brandon said quietly, and I told him he embarrassed me. Derek didn't say anything. Sometimes there's nothing to say. Outside, the first investors were arriving. Time to put on the show. 200 people waited for the next lie. I just waited for my son. I drove down Saturday afternoon. It took me 90 minutes on Highway 13 through Kimberling City. I wasn't invited, but I'd been thinking about that speech Brandon was planning to give, thinking about him standing up in front of all those people and telling them how he built his empire with nothing but vision and grit. I parked on the county road about a quarter mile from the lake house, walked in through the tree line. Nobody saw me. I'm good at not being seen. The party was in full swing by 5 o'clock. Cocktail hour. Men in blazers and women in sundresses holding champagne flutes. The string quartet playing something classical I didn't recognize. The whole scene looked like a commercial for a life I'd paid for but never lived. I stayed back by the property line, just watching. At 6, the caterers started moving people toward the tables. Dinner was served, something fancy with small portions on big plates. I could smell the grilled meat from where I stood. Brandon was at the head table, looked composed, confidence. Every inch the successful executive. He laughed at the right times, shook hands, played the part perfectly. At 7:30, the MC, some guy from Wharton's alumni office, tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, it's my honor to introduce one of our most distinguished graduates. 25 years ago, he sat in our classrooms dreaming of what he might build. Today, he manages over $2 billion in assets. Please welcome Brandon Whitman. Applause. 200 people clapped, some standing. Brandon walked to the microphone, had note cards in his hand. That speech he'd been practicing. He looked out at the crowd, smiled. Confidence. Ready. 25 years ago, I left Wharton with a dream and a maxed-out credit card. People laughed. They always laugh at that line. I didn't have family money, didn't have connections. What I had was a willingness to work harder than anyone else, to take risks when others played it safe, to build something from nothing. He paused. That dramatic pause speakers use before the big line. That's when he saw me. I'd stepped out of the tree line. I walked up to the back gate, didn't make a scene, just stood there in my cleanest flannel shirt and the same work boots I'd polished that morning. Our eyes met across 200 people and 75 yards of perfect lawn. His mouth was still open. The next sentence of his speech is waiting to be said, but nothing came out. The crowd started to murmur. People turned to see what he was looking at. Some of them spotted me. The old man in work clothes standing at the back gate like he'd wandered in from a different world. Brandon just stared. I started walking forward. I didn't come to shame him. I came to stop being ashamed of myself. The crowd parted as I walked through. Nobody stopped me. I think they were too surprised to move. I could hear whispers. Who is that? Is that his father? Why is he dressed like that? I walked slowly, didn't rush. My boots crunched on the gravel path, then went quiet on the grass. The string quartet had stopped playing. Even the caterers had frozen. Brandon was still at the microphone. His note cards hung loose in his hand. His face had gone pale. I walked up the 3 steps to the platform. I stood next to him. Up close, I could see he'd been sweating despite the cool evening air. Dad, he said it quietly. Just for me. I put my hand out, not for a shake, for the microphone. He hesitated, then handed it to me. I looked out at 200 faces. Wealthy people, educated people, the kind of people who make decisions that move markets and change cities. They were all staring at the old pipe fitter in the flannel shirt who just interrupted their party. I didn't have a speech prepared. I didn't need one. "My name is Earl Ray Whitman," I said. The microphone made my voice carry across the lawn. Steady, clear. "I'm Brandon's father. I'm 74 years old. I laid pipe for 52 years in refineries and power plants from here to Tulsa." I could see people glancing at each other, confused. "Brandon just told you he built everything himself, that he started with nothing but a dream and a maxed-out credit card." I paused. "That's not exactly true." Brandon closed his eyes. "Every brick of this life you're watching him live was laid with these hands." I held them up, scarred, calloused, stained with work that doesn't wash off. Education, the bailouts, the farm I sold to keep his first fund alive, every bit of it. The crowd was dead silent now. "I'm proud of my son," I said. "Proud of what he's built, proud of what he's become. I just wish he'd been proud of me first. Proud enough not to tell me I embarrassed him. Proud enough to let me sit at this table he thinks I'm not good enough for." I set the microphone down on the podium. The feedback screeched for a second. I looked at Brandon. He had tears in his eyes, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the ground. I walked back down the steps, back through the crowd. Nobody said a word. Nobody moved. I walked all the way back to my truck on the county road, drove home with the windows down and the radio off. It was done. Sometimes the heaviest load a man carries is the one nobody ever thanks him for. I drove north on Highway 13 as the sun was setting behind me. The lake disappeared in my rearview mirror, then the fancy houses, then the clean suburban streets with their perfect lawns. Eventually, it was just two-lane blacktop and pine trees and the kind of darkness you only get when you're miles from anywhere that matters. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need it. For the first time in maybe 10 years, my chest didn't feel tight. That pressure I'd been carrying, the kind you don't even notice until it's gone, had lifted somewhere between the microphone and my truck. I thought about Brandon's face when I held up my hands, thought about 200 people seeing exactly what built their golden boy's empire, thought about the truth finally being in the same room as the lie. I wasn't angry anymore. That's the strange part. I'd driven down there thinking I might be, thinking I'd feel righteous or vindicated or whatever it is men are supposed to feel when they finally speak up. But all I felt was tired and lighter, like I'd been carrying Brandon's reputation on my back for 26 years, and somebody had finally let me set it down. The highway curved through Newton County, past the old dairy farms and the shut-down truck stops and the churches with their marquee signs promising salvation, past the places where men like me had built lives with our hands and our backs and our willingness to show up every day whether anybody noticed or not. I passed a billboard for a personal injury lawyer, then one for a casino, then a hand-painted sign advertising fresh eggs, $2 a dozen. That's America, I thought. The real one, not the lake houses and the champagne and the speeches about bootstraps, just people trying to make an honest living and hoping their kids remember where they came from. I got back to Joplin around 9:30. The streets were quiet. Saturday night, but this isn't the kind of town where much happens after dark anymore. I pulled into my driveway, sat there for a minute with the engine off, looking at my little house with its sagging porch and the roof that needs replacing. Mary would have been proud of me tonight. She always said I was too quiet, too willing to let things slide. "Earl," she'd say, "sometimes a man has to speak up, or people forget he's got a voice." I spoke up tonight, used the voice these hands earned. I went inside. I made myself a sandwich, ham and cheese on white bread, ate it standing at the kitchen counter, washed the plate and put it in the drainer. Then I sat in my recliner and turned on the TV, some old Western I'd seen before. It didn't matter. I was asleep before the good guys won, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream about anything at all. A 74-year-old man shouldn't have to teach a 44-year-old man how to be a man, but sometimes that's how it goes. I woke up at 5:30 like always, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table with the Sunday paper I don't really read anymore but still buy out of habit. At 8:15, I heard a car in the driveway, different from yesterday, slower, uncertain. I looked out the window. Brandon's BMW. He just sat there with the engine running for maybe 2 minutes, like he was trying to decide whether to leave. Finally, the engine shut off. The door opened. He looked like hell. Same clothes from yesterday, hair messed up, eyes red like he'd been crying or hadn't slept or both. I opened the front door before he could knock. We stood there looking at each other, father and son, 74 and 44, a lifetime of distance in 3 feet of porch. "Can I come in?" he asked. "It's your father's house. You don't have to ask." He flinched at that, but he came inside. I poured him coffee without asking if he wanted it, set it on the kitchen table, sat down in my usual chair. He sat across from me, wrapped his hands around the mug like he was cold even though it was already 70 degrees outside. "I drove around all night," he said. "Just drove. Didn't know where to go. I waited. Everyone left after you walked out. The party just ended. 200 people were standing there. Nobody knew what to do. The caterers started packing up. The quartet left. Derek told me to go home and sleep on it. Did you?" "No." He looked at me. "Dad, I'm so sorry." "Okay." "No, not okay." His voice cracked. "I told you you embarrassed me." "Jesus Christ, Dad. You, the man who gave me everything. I told you that you embarrassed me. You did. And then you showed up yesterday and said what you said in front of everyone and..." He stopped, took a breath. "You had every right. You had every right to burn me down in front of those people, and you didn't. You just told the truth. Truth's all I had left to give you." He put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook. "My son, 44 years old, manages billions of dollars, drives a $70,000 car, was crying at my kitchen table. I let him. Sometimes a man needs to." When he finally looked up, his face was wet. "Can we sit on the porch, like we used to?" I remembered, when he was 10, 11, 12, before the fancy schools and the business degrees. We'd sit on the porch on Sunday mornings and talk about nothing important. Baseball, fishing, the neighbor's dog. "Yeah," I said, "we can sit on the porch." We took our coffee outside. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not the clean, easy kind people talk about, but it was a start, a crack in the wall we'd both been building for 20 years. Sometimes that's all you get. Sometimes that's enough. Sat in the 2 old metal chairs I'd bought at a yard sale in 1989, and we sat there quietly, like men do when words have finally run out. Respect isn't inherited, it's returned. We sat there for maybe an hour, not talking much, just being there. Brandon watched a robin building a nest in the oak tree at the edge of my yard. I watched the Hendersons load their car for church across the street. Sunday morning in a neighborhood that's looked the same for 40 years. Finally, Brandon said, "The fund returns have been good, really good. Your stake has grown." "I know. I get the quarterly statements. I want to buy you out. Fair market value. You could..." "I don't want your money." He looked at me. "Dad, it's $7 million. You're living in a house that needs a new roof. You're driving a truck with 200,000 miles on it. Let me..." "I said I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" I stood up, went inside, came back with something I'd been keeping in the fire safe next to the envelope he never knew about. A deed, old paper, yellowed at the edges. I handed it to him. He unfolded it, read it. His eyes went wide. "This is the farm, Grandpa's farm. But it says..." He looked at the date. "This is from 2023. How did you..." I bought it back. Quiet. Private sale. Took me 5 years and every fund distribution I ever received. Had to take out a loan for the rest. But I got it done. You bought back the land you sold to save me. Land belongs in Whitman hands. Your grandfather believed that. I believe that. Now you need to believe it. Dad, this is worth millions. I know what it's worth. I'm giving it to you anyway." I sat back down. "But I'm not giving it to Brandon who told me I embarrassed him. I'm giving it to Brandon who showed up this morning with red eyes and an apology." He stared at the deed. "I don't deserve this. Nobody deserves their inheritance. They earn the right to keep it." I looked at him. "Your grandfather worked that land for 30 years. Never got rich. Never wanted to. Just wanted something to pass down that mattered. I almost lost it trying to save you. Now I'm giving you a second chance to honor it. What do I do with it? That's up to you. Keep it. Give it to your kids someday if you have them. Just don't sell it to build another fund. Don't turn it into something you can brag about at parties. He folded the deed carefully, put it in his shirt pocket, right over his heart. I won't, he said. Good. We sat there quietly again. The sun was getting higher. The day is warming up. Are you hungry? I asked. Yeah. There's a cafe on Main Street. Best eggs in Jasper County. I know it, he said. You go there every Saturday. Feel like joining me? He looked at me. Really looked at me. Yeah, Dad. I'd like that. He is still embarrassed. Only now, it's when he thinks about how close he came to losing me. The following Saturday, I drove to the Route 66 cafe like I always do. Parked in my usual spot. Got there at 7:30. Brandon was already inside, sitting on the stool next to mine, the one I'd been leaving empty for 20 years without knowing I was waiting for him to fill it. He was wearing jeans and a plain work shirt. No Italian shoes, no cologne, just a 44-year-old man who looked like he might have finally figured out what matters. I sat down next to him. Doreen came over with the coffee pot. She looked at Brandon, then at me. Didn't say anything, but I could see the question in her eyes. 2 coffees, I said. Black. She poured them both, set down 2 menus we didn't need. The usual Earl? Yeah, and whatever he wants. Brandon ordered the same thing I always get. Eggs are easy, toast dry, bacon crisp. We sat there quietly while Doreen put in the order. The cafe was filling up with the Saturday morning crowd. Retired guys from the plant, farmers from the county, people who work with their hands and don't apologize for it. Frank Dougherty nodded at me from the corner booth. I nodded back. He was here last Saturday. Brandon said quiet. When I said what I said, I know. They all were. I know that too. Our food came. We ate in silence for a while. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that happens between 2 men who finally said everything that needed saying and can just exist next to each other without filling the air with words. Brandon finished first. Set down his fork. I looked at his coffee cup. I'm keeping an apartment in Kansas City, he said, but I'm going to be down here more, maybe every other weekend. Work on the farm, fix the fences, get to know that land. That'd be good. And I was thinking, he stopped, started again. I was thinking maybe we could do this every Saturday, if you want. I looked at my son, saw the boy who used to help me change the oil in the driveway, saw the teenager who'd mowed lawns for gas money, saw the man who'd gotten so far from where he started that he'd forgotten the way home, and I saw him finding his way back. Yeah, I said, I'd like that. Doreen came by with the coffee pot, topped us both off without asking. Do you boys need anything else? No, ma'am, I said. We're good. Brandon picked up the check before I could, left a 20 on a $15 tab. We walked out together into the morning sun, father and son, side by side, the way it should have been all along. If I could talk to the 35-year-old version of me holding a newborn Brandon, here's what I'd say while the coffee was still hot. It's Tuesday night, 2 weeks after Brandon and I had breakfast at the cafe. I can't sleep. Haven't been able to sleep right since Mary passed, but tonight's different. Tonight, my mind won't stop working. I get up at midnight, make coffee even though I know I shouldn't, sit at the kitchen table with a legal pad I found in the junk drawer. I start writing, not to Brandon, not to anyone specific, just writing what 52 years of raising a boy taught me. The things I wish someone had told me back when Brandon was small, and I thought love was enough. Love your kids fiercely, but don't let that love turn you into a doormat. This is my first. Underline it twice. There's a difference between sacrifice and surrender. Sacrifice is giving up something valuable for something more valuable. Surrender is giving up yourself piece by piece until there's nothing left but the ghost of who you used to be. The coffee gets cold. I keep writing. Keep the receipts. Not for revenge or to wave in their faces someday. Keep them so on the day they need to see the truth, and that day will come. You have proof that love is more than words. It's wire transfers and second mortgages and farms you'll never get back. My hand is cramping. I'm 74 years old and my handwriting looks like a third grader's, but I keep going. Never trade your self-respect for their approval. I spent 20 years trying to earn Brandon's respect by being invisible, by not embarrassing him, by staying small so he could feel big. All it taught him was that I was someone to be ashamed of. I think about that 35-year-old version of me, hair still dark, back still strong, holding that baby at Joplin General and thinking I'd move mountains for him. I did move mountains, just forgot to teach him who moved them. A man's worth isn't measured by his bank account or his job title or whether he knows which fork to use at fancy dinners. It's measured by whether he can look in the mirror after he's given everything away and still recognize the person looking back. I set down the pen. Read what I wrote. It's not poetry. It's not even particularly well written, but it's true. That's all that matters. I fold the pages, 3 sheets of legal paper covered in my chicken scratch handwriting. Slide them into an envelope. Don't address it. Don't seal it. Just set it on the table and look at it for a long time. Some letters aren't meant to be mailed. They're meant to be written. That's enough. I finish my cold coffee. Stand up. My knees crack. Everything hurts at 74, but my chest feels clear. Son, when you're 50 and your own boy looks at you like you're from another planet, remember how this felt. I turn to a fresh page on the legal pad. This one's harder to write. Dear Brandon, I cross it out. This isn't just for him. It's for every son who ever looked at his father's rough hands and saw embarrassment instead of evidence. Your father's hands are rough because they built the smooth life you take for granted. I write it straight, no softening it. Those calluses paid for your textbooks. Those scars bought your confidence, and that grease under the fingernails bought every opportunity you ever had. The pen feels heavy, but I keep going. One day those hands won't be there to catch you, won't be there to wire money when you're sure things fall apart, won't be there to sell the family land to save your reputation. You'll reach for the phone and remember your old man is gone, and you never said thank you. I stop, take a breath. This isn't about guilt. It's about the truth. Pride is cheap, costs nothing but your integrity. Gratitude is priceless. It costs you having to admit you didn't do it all yourself. I think about Brandon sitting next to me at the cafe last Saturday, how he looked at his own hands like he was seeing them for the first time. Clean, soft, unmarked by anything harder than a keyboard. The measure of a man isn't the watch he wears, or the car he drives, or how many investors shake his hand at parties. It's whether he can sit on a tailgate with his old man drinking beer from a can and not feel like he's slumming. I write faster now. The words come easier. Your father worked in places you'll never see. Refineries at 3 a.m. when it was so cold, the coffee in his thermos turned to slush. Power plants in July when the heat index hit 115 and men passed out just walking to their trucks. He did that for you, not because he had to, because he loved you more than he loved comfort. My hand is shaking now, not from the writing, from something else. When you have a son of your own, if you haven't already, and you're working late, trying to build something for him, and he grows up and tells you you're an embarrassment, remember this moment. Remember what it felt like, and ask yourself if the money was worth more than the man. I set down the pen. Look at what I've written. It's not fair. Not entirely. Brandon apologized, showed up, sat on the porch and cried, but the words needed to be written anyway, for the other sons, the ones who haven't apologized yet, the ones who still have time. Anger is a heavy tenant. Evicting it leaves room you didn't know you still had. I fold both letters together, slide them into the manila envelope with all the old documents, walk to the closet, open the fire safe. 14, 32, 8. Mary's birthday. I'll never change that combination. I put the envelope inside, right on top, close the safe, spin the dial, and then I just stand there in the closet with Mary's old coats brushing my shoulders. The house is quiet, 3 a.m. quiet, the kind of silence that usually makes loneliness louder. But tonight, it feels different. I walk back to the kitchen, look at the clock on the microwave, 3:17. In a few hours, I'll get up and make breakfast, and the day will start over like it always does. But right now, standing in my kitchen in my undershirt and old pajama pants, I realize something has changed. That weight I've been carrying, the resentment, the anger, the feeling of being used and forgotten, it's gone. Not buried, not hidden, Actually gone. I think about Brandon at the lake house. Think about his face when I held up my hands and told 200 people the truth. Think about him sitting at my kitchen table crying into his coffee. I think about him showing up at the cafe last Saturday wearing work clothes, ordering eggs the same way I do, leaving a big tip for Doreen. Maybe that's what forgiveness feels like. Not some big emotional moment, just the absence of the thing that was eating you alive. I open the cabinet above the sink, pull down the bottle of bourbon Mary gave me for my 65th birthday. There's maybe 2 fingers left. I've been saving it for something. Never knew what. I pour it into a coffee mug. Don't bother with ice. Raise it to the dark kitchen, to the table where Mary and I paid bills and argued about money and planned Brandon's future, to the counter where I've made 10,000 pots of coffee, to the life I built with these hands. Here's to you, old man. I say to nobody, you did all right. I drink it. Tastes like smoke and oak and something I can't name. Warmth spreads through my chest. I rinse the mug, set it in the drainer, go back to bed, and for the first time since Mary died, I sleep straight through until my alarm goes off at 5:30. No dreams, no waking up at 2, no lying there thinking about what I should have said or could have done differently. Just sleep, deep and quiet and earned. Some stories don't end with a bang or an apology. They end with 2 men drinking coffee and the road still stretching out ahead. Saturday morning, 5:30. I'm awake before the alarm like always. I make coffee. Stand at the kitchen window watching the sun come up over Bill's house across the street. The sky goes from black to gray to pink to gold, same as it's done every morning for 74 years. I think about driving to the cafe, think about whether Brandon will be there again. Then I think maybe I'll take the long way. Give him time to get there first if he's coming. Let him sit there wondering if I'll show. I get dressed, clean jeans, flannel shirt, the work boots. Pour my coffee into the old thermos Mary bought me in 1987. Fire up the Silverado. She turns over on the first try. Always does. I pull out of the driveway, but instead of turning toward Main Street, I head east, out past the old plant, past the zinc mines, past the elementary school where Brandon learned to read. County roads I've known since I was 17. Every curve, every pothole, every spot where the pavement turns to gravel and back again. I pass the property where the farm used to be, the land my father worked, the land I sold and bought back, the land that's Brandon's now. Someone's already out there. Truck parked by the gate, man walking the fence line in the early light. I slow down, look closer. It's Brandon, work gloves on, hammer in his belt, fixing a section of fence that's been sagging for 10 years. He doesn't see me. He's focused on the wire, on the work, on something real he can touch and fix and make right. I don't stop, don't honk, just keep driving. In my rearview mirror, I watch him get smaller. My son, 44 years old, finally learning what his hands are for. I smile, can't help it. Turn back toward town, toward Main Street, toward the Route 66 cafe where 2 coffees are probably already poured and getting cold. The sun's fully up now. Saturday morning in Joplin, Missouri. The same town I've lived in my whole life. The same streets. The same people. But somehow it all looks different. I tip my cap to the sunrise coming through the windshield. We turned out all right, old man, I say out loud to nobody. The Silverado rolls on down the straight Missouri road, 218,000 miles and counting. Still running smoothly. Still got places to go.